Uncharted is a long-running action-adventure series exclusively available on Sony PlayStation 3 and 4, and it was developed by Naughty Dog. Its first release was in 2007 with Uncharted Drakes Fortune, which was subsequently updated in 2015 alongside Uncharted 2 and 3, with updated graphics and improved performance, all completed by Bluepoint Games. The gameplay remains largely the same, with some adjustments to core combat mechanics. I thought I'd take a look at it and see what reasons there are to recommend playing several years after its original release. I will be playing the 2015 updated edition. This adventure begins with our main playable character, the intrepid explorer Nathan Drake, on a small boat, just after recovering the coffin of legendary explorer Sir Francis Drake, which Nathan is supposedly a descendant of, and who was supposedly buried at sea. Drake is joined by Elena Fisher, a journalist who is looking for her scoop on the recovery of Francis Drake's coffin. The coffin itself is empty. The only item inside is a small chest containing Francis' journal, which contains all the clues needed to find the treasure of El Dorado. The pair are joined by Drake's treasure hunting associate Victor Sullivan, a man after easy riches. Sullivan convinces Drake that Elena will be detrimental to their cause and leaves her stranded as they go and find the treasure elsewhere. It's not that simple, however, as Drake and Sullivan are tailed by the archetype British villain Gabriel Roman with the hired help of Antok Navarro, who wants the treasure for his own gain. Naughty Dog has put a lot of time into the storyline of this game and overall franchise, and is one of the main strengths following the earlier days of Crash Bandicoot, which were goofy and had few features for the story. It wasn't really that important back then. The relationships between Drake, Sullivan and Elena alongside the main villains provide the player with enough to start to understand what motivates them in a quick but not rushed way. There's serious dialogue mixed with sections of downtime and slapstick comedy, which balance nicely as the game isn't too one-sided in its tone. Without giving away the entire plot, I was left satisfied with the game's outcome, as a notable twist revealed at the end, and felt much like a video game adaptation of film franchises such as Indiana Jones. The twist in the plot can be pretty obvious if the player has been paying attention to the subtle voice lines, items and set pieces within the game. The game's locales are mostly set within jungles and underground temple ruins, which are somewhat generic but fit nicely into the themes of exploration and following in the footsteps of the previous Drake. The locales vary later in the game, and I wasn't bored by what I saw overall. The gameplay is divided into particular styles, the most prominent of which are third-person shooter elements, where Drake has a selection of pistols, shotguns, assault rifles, and the occasional special weapon to use against the onslaught of enemies that interrupts his quest for El Dorado. Puzzle sequences are also present within the game and provide a little challenge to the player, which isn't too easy or too hard, and shouldn't prevent the player from moving forward for too long. It nicely breaks up the shooting sections of the game, which could potentially be a bit monotonous otherwise. These puzzles usually involve a number of ancient stone-based objects, and Drake will help you by referring to the journal that you collected from the coffin at the beginning of the game, as it contains basic clues to help solve these puzzles. Climbing and traversing the landscape happens frequently during the course of the game, and shows off some of the nice surrounding environments present within the various levels, especially whilst outside, and additionally are mostly a means of travelling in a different way. There are also some vehicle sections in the game, although the player only has direct control over water sequences, which are on jet skis. Nonetheless, it provides some needed variation in the gameplay. Those who like collecting items in games will also be able to find a number of small treasures throughout the experience. Some are very well hidden, and you'll likely want a guide to collect them all first time round. Overall, I found the pacing of the game in terms of its combat, puzzles and exploration to be good, with the story being the standout feature to this installment as well as the rest of the games in the series. Although with combat on higher difficulties you will most likely have to go loud, as stealth is rarely an option. Killing enemies with melee does reward the player with double the amount of ammo than if you were to kill them with a weapon. So sometimes the incentive is worth it, as you will go through lots of bullets, especially towards the end of the game. From a graphics and sound design perspective, Uncharted Drakes Fortune is neither poor or exceptional. There have been good improvements to texture quality and especially lighting thanks to Blue Point, but the game doesn't look too remarkable in the modern day, especially with other more recent games, which is to be expected. So you shouldn't expect the highest quality graphical effects whilst playing. I will say that the animation quality during cutscenes and overall is quite impressive, especially for the original title, which is over a decade old now. The musical score of the game is fitting for its environment and adds some good atmosphere while progressing through. A major positive of this experience is the game that ran smoothly at 60 FPS, which improves over the original title back on PlayStation 3. I saw no graphical issues, such as flickering or missing textures, and mechanically, Drake's Fortune gets most of its aspects to feel just fine, like movement of Drake whilst walking, running, climbing, and jumping, all that with aiming and firing the various weapons in the game. And using heavier weapons can be quite satisfying, such as the grenade launcher, or the heavier pistols such as the revolver and the Desert Eagle, which will take out opponents very quickly. As with all games, nothing can be 100% perfect, so to be fair, I'll go through the not so great things I found within Drake's Fortune. During the course of gameplay, certain sounds unfortunately become repetitive, and you'll often hear enemy callouts repeat the same phrases again and again, such as this one. The game is not without its bugs either. A notable bug I had whilst playing a certain section was the use of grenades. I would move the marker for throwing the grenade to arc up above me to strike its intended target, but would often end up flying to the side, almost killing me repeatedly, which is surprising to see in the remastered version of the game, and something to potentially look out for in your own playthrough. Like many third-person action shooters, there is a cover system, which Drake will have to utilise if you want him to survive against the number of bad guys shooting at you. And sometimes you'll stick to cover when you mean to break away from it, and not roll to the next piece, which again can be a little precarious in certain combat scenarios. Sometimes Drake will be a little broken with his movement. For instance, he'll try to grab a ledge, but will end up falling and an animation will fail, which will cause a little frustration, but thankfully this didn't occur too much in my playthrough. I played this on hard mode, and the enemies are often no joke. Peek out from cover for too long, and you're rewarded with almost instantaneous death. The game does have higher difficulties, but I think hard mode is just fine for most players. In certain areas of the game, combat can drag the pace right down to a halt, especially if you keep dying again and again to laser-like accurate enemies, which there are often in this game. Wrapping things up, my playthrough lasted around 6.5 hours. I didn't rush this experience, nor did I try and complete everything within it, by collecting all the small treasures hidden within the game. I would have found that a little tedious. I liked this introduction to the characters, and although they followed certain tropes, I found their interactions believable. And the game nicely sets up for future expansions, which we saw in its sequels across the generations. The environments were nice to explore, albeit linear. Certain flaws in its design will annoy you, especially at higher tiers of difficulty, like I mentioned before. Nonetheless, if you want to experience a good action exploration game with its strong narrative across this game and the series in general, I would recommend this title to new players to the franchise and those who want to re-experience the beginning of a great series, as Naughty Dog improves upon this entree in Uncharted 2 and 3. In this modernised format, it looks better than ever and plays at higher consistent frame rates, as well as getting 3 games in one package with the Nathan Drake collection. so there's not really much point on playing the original 2007 edition back on PlayStation 3. Thanks for watching my rundown of Uncharted Drakes Fortune on PlayStation 4. Feel free to leave your comments about the game down below. And for this review, I already have a full playthrough uploaded to this channel. Additionally, as this was the first review-based format on this channel, feel free to leave a comment down below on what you think I could improve upon. And as always, I've been Geogen, and I'll see you in the next one.